everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Alex Gosse, owner of Magically Resin, working in collaboration this year with Craft Resin to bring you all of these wonderful ideas on how to use craft resin and ways to make sure that your products really work the best for you, and giving you tips and tricks that I've learned along the way because I've been doing resin for a long time. I found these glass trivets at Dollar Tree a while back, and I bought a bunch of them because I knew that at some point these would be ideal for, they're really good size to hang on the wall. They're super pretty. And since I've made this piece, I decided I'm going to turn mine into a little wall lamp because it turned out so lovely and it's very zen, which is perfect for the decor in one of my rooms. So that will be another video if that's something that you're interested in seeing, how I turn this into a lamp later. Please be sure and leave in the comments. I have my trusty glue gun to get rid of the last bit of glue that was stuck between the feet and the glass, because I want to make sure the glass is really pristine before I do anything with resin or really any adhesive at all. I want to make sure that the glue gun gets the goo off, and then I will clean the glass really well to make sure that the glue gun is gone too. Wow, that was a tongue twister. So now my glass is pristine and ready to go, and I'm working on the side of the glass that does not have texture because I really like the texture and I want you to be able to see it through the piece. So I'm using the texture on the bottom of the trivet as part of the overall look that I want. And that's a great thing about pieces of glass that are already made. Now, as many of you know, I am also a 3D printer, so I have about 1 million glue sticks around, and I love these larger glue sticks that start out purple and then turn white as they go. They work so great to adhere something down, and I know that I'm going to cover this with resin, so all that I need is for it to really hold this in place while I trim it down to the right size. So I want it to stick, I want it not to move, and I want it to be solid. It's not about longevity, it's about this moment right now. I want it down very flat and very solid and very dry. So these glue sticks are perfect. I can't say enough about them for this type of application, especially sticking onto glass or to resin. Just know that that isn't going to be a long time adhesive, that's going to very quickly hold it in place, but not for any length of time. And it's also water soluble. So it's easy to clean up, but also it is easy to get it to come off with water, which can be problematic. So now I'm just trimming down this piece of foil that I make. I make a copper foil, large sheets of copper foil that are actual copper. I use these all the time in so many different applications. Right now, I'm madly in love with the copper look, and I love the conductive nature of copper. Is such a wonderful healthy thing. I'm not going to go into talking about the health benefits of any of these things, but I feel that copper is a wonderful element to pull into your art, and I believe that it does have healthy value, so I do it because I believe that. That said, I do not think that anyone should take my word for it. I'm not a doctor, and I just use things that I think are pretty and healthy and make me feel more connected with nature. And if that resonates with you, that's fantastic. I will have a list of all of the products that I've used in this tutorial and links to where you can get them, and a link to my Etsy shop if you're interested in buying your own copper sheet, or make a wide variety of things that you can put into your resin that just elevate your project and make it more unique to the voice that you're trying to express through your art. I really want art to be the most beautiful and the easiest for someone to create that just started. I want this to be very, because I found that to be true with resin. It was incredibly rewarding how surprisingly pretty the pieces were with the level of skill that I had, which really is why I named my company Magically Resin, because it is truly magic how amazing and beautiful things are that you can make right off the bat. So I'm using a resin poured piece as a palette, basically. I wasn't in love with how this piece turned out, and turned out to be such a great palette that now I use it all the time. So I have mixed up some gel paste, which is going to dry clear, and I've added some glitter and some alcohol ink to it to enhance the color, which you can't really tell right now. Gel paste is much like school glue in the fact that it's white when it starts and then it's clear when it dries. So it's not going to dry looking like this. It's going to dry looking like whatever the glitter was that I put in it and whatever the alcohol ink was that I put in it. So I'm not an expert at this. I've only done this a few times, so I may be not buttering this up correctly. But I also think there's so much to gain in showing you that I'm not an expert at lots of these things that I do with resin. I am an expert with resin. But all these other things that I try, I'm just trying stuff. And sometimes it turns out pretty and sometimes it doesn't. This one turned out really pretty, and I was thrilled that I tried this new technique. So have a play with stuff. Oh gosh, my English friends are totally rubbing off on me. To have a play, that's so English. Craft Resin is in England, and all of my new friends from there have such a wonderful way of speaking. So there are so many ways that you can play with resin. There are so many things that you can add to the top of a resin piece or embed in resin, because this is glass that I'm going to cover with resin. But also, the glass could just as easily have been a resin piece. It happened to be something that I already had, but I could have just as easily poured a resin blank of something this size, and that would have worked perfectly. So as it turned out, this worked great. I taped down the stencil on the side that wasn't that I wouldn't be working with, and it turned out that it was great. But if it hadn't been, I could have scraped it up and started over, or I could have scraped it up and just trashed the idea, and nothing would have been lost from that. The gel paste is pretty cheap, and the glitter and the alcohol ink, I mean, I used almost none of that. Here you're seeing I had some extra gel paste because I had no idea how much to mix for a project like this. And I thought it would be fun just to put some gel paste in one of these wine stoppers. I am just making and selling these like crazy. People are in love with these stoppers, and I think they're fabulous for pouring in. When you're done with the pour, the resin accumulates at the bottom and it makes a really pretty top, whatever color resin you were using. And then you can fill in with clear resin or with something complementary the next time that you pour. So it is a really easy way to A, not have to clean a cup, and B, use a lot of different colors in something without having all kinds of different cups and things going on. So I have a bunch of these and I absolutely love them. And I think they're super fun for trying out new techniques in, like this one. If you're interested in seeing the results of this, I will post it on my YouTube and Instagram next week. This is the gel paste leaf about an hour after I've done it, so I'm not concerned about it sliding around or moving or anything. It's pretty solidly on there, but I thought it would be a cool time to show you some of the leaves are thinner and they're already dry and they're very translucent, and the others are not dry yet and they're still very opaque. So this tells you how you know when your gel paste is dry. It's going to be that translucent effect unless you've added something to it that makes it not translucent, like mica powder. This is 24 hours later. I've given the gel paste plenty of time to dry and to cure and be ready for the resin so that there's no chance of capturing any liquid in the gel paste, and also so that the gel paste is completely translucent at this point. I have prepared my craft resin as I always do, and there are a bunch of videos on Craft Resin YouTube about how to properly prepare your resin. In a nutshell, I start with the resin being at least 95 degrees. Mine is usually warmer, 95 degrees Fahrenheit, because I'm in Texas. For you Celsius people, all the information that you would need is on the Craft Resin website. And all of the links to that are going to be below in the description. So I've mixed my resin together, equal parts A and B by volume, and I have mixed it for 7 minutes, and it's about 115 degrees before I get started. And I like to, when I'm doing a piece like this that's flat, but there is a fair bit of texture with the gel, so I want this to be kind of like a dome. Well, I mean, it is a dome. I end up doming it again as well to get a really pristine top, because I end up using this piece for myself as a lamp. And I like the resin to be relatively thick before I get started so that it doesn't rush off the edges and that it holds its body on top of something with texture like the leaf. So here I have resin mixed with white Pinata alcohol ink and a couple drops of silicone oil, and in a very small amount I'm pulling this through because I'm looking for a cloudy effect. I'm going to add a jade color very shortly, and I want there to be a white pearl plus a transparent jade. And I'm looking for something very earthy and zen and warm, but I don't want this to take over. And this is a wonderful technique to make waves, but I don't want this to look like waves. I want this to look more like clouds. So this technique is great for any time that you have an alcohol ink, like black or white in particular work the best with this. And Pinata is all that I use, so I can't speak to how something else would work. But I really like how it can create a very soft dispersion of the alcohol ink, and I think this effect is just lovely. I was introduced to this effect by one of my dear friends, Chrissy, who owns Stand Together UK, and she does work with craft resin too. So if you're interested in seeing this type of ocean effect or cloud effect used in other videos, Craft Resin has a bunch of videos on this technique. It also creates a beautiful marble effect when used in a different way. So there's a lot of ways to use this one technique, and it's so valuable. I'm mixing up my jade green color, and all of the things that I put into that color will be in the description. It is mica powder plus alcohol ink, and it is such a lovely, soft feel. I wanted something absolutely, almost completely translucent that was just a whisper of a color. Like, it may feel like if you thought about a color, then that was what would show up. I wanted it so light, and I didn't want it to overpower the white. So I am getting a little bit of spillover, and that's completely fine. The way that I do this is set up to have spillover, and I did it on a mat. But I also waited till the resin was relatively thick so that I wouldn't have too much spillover, and that all of that would be usable. And I'm picking up most of it from the mat to put it into the stopper mold, so there's no loss there really. I mean, a little bit was wasted, but not a lot. And I like this technique instead of doing all the taping it up and all of that, which is fine too for some projects. But for this, I actually wanted it to flow over the edge because I like the look of a piece when the resin flows over the edge. And that can only be done with then getting resin, on some type of mat. But that's well worth it. And it turned out so beautiful. The rounded edge is so delightful. I like to use something with a solid edge like a popsicle stick to just clean up the drips for now. It's easy enough when resin is still soft on glass to clean off the drips with a heated knife, which I use all the time. And if y'all are interested in knowing how I do that or watching a video about that, please be sure and leave that in the comments. But I figure the more that I clean up as I go, the less that I have to clean up later on. And I also just, well, I'm a stickler for how it looks while I'm doing it. I go by how stuff looks. Does this look pretty? How do I feel about how this looks? And almost everything I do in resin is defined by how do I feel about how this looks. That I probably asked myself that a million times. And that's also how I know when to stop. Regardless of what my plan was when I got started, if I feel like something is perfect right now, I stop and put everything away. And always be sure and cover up a piece like this for a wide variety of reasons. You don't want anything to get into it. You don't want any cats to get into it or stick their paws in it, or for your kids to get into it or anything like that. So keep your kids safe, keep your pets safe, keep your resin safe, and cover your stuff, especially if it has a large space like this where it just wants to attract pet hair and dust, because I know I have a lot of pets and everything I make gets pet hair and dust in it. So I'm adding an alcohol mixture that I make myself, but this would be easily done with Pinata Gold. And I'm just putting a couple drops in, and then I've already sprayed this with alcohol spray before I dropped in the alcohol ink so that the alcohol ink would disperse very easily and not get all clumped up. And I just want to pull a little bit through on that one side. I want this to be a nice accent and a different color than the copper, but without being jarring. So I really like how this little accent of gold turned out, and it feels really pretty. At this point, I felt like it needed a little bit more white. The white had gotten a bit washed out with the green, and I love this effect, and it wasn't, you have to be super sparing with this because I didn't want it to take over, especially since I was doing all this in one pour, and I didn't want the cloud effect to cover the leaf, which is why I'm blowing it the way that I am. But I did want there to be more of a cloud effect and for it to be a little more prominent. So I added just a little bit more of the Pinata combination alcohol ink, resin, silicone. So I'm feeling really good about the piece at this point, and I want to just put it away. So I pull out my flashlight so that I can check to make sure that the top looks really good. So if you see fluctuations of light, I have my flashlight out and I'm looking at the piece by moving the flashlight around it and looking at different ways to make sure that the top is completely flat. I don't expect that I'm going to be able to just finish this with this one coat. I expect that it's going to need a dome coat, but I still want it to be as good as possible. This is the finished piece after an additional dome coat. And it's completely flat, but it has so much body and texture. I am thrilled with how this technique turned out. You are going to see me doing this a lot. This paste, this doesn't even do it justice. It's so gorgeous that I just fell in love with it and decided it had to be in my own home. I had to keep this. And I got offers for someone to buy it, and I'm going to do something special and unique for them. But because I had to keep it. It's so perfect for one of my rooms, and I'm just so thrilled. The copper is a beautiful reflective amount. The cloudy turned out perfect. The depth on the paste is so beautiful. And the gold, it's hard to see the gold without being in the right angle, but the gold floating on the top really was such a nice finishing touch. I thank you so much for joining me today and spending your precious time with me. I hope that I've inspired you to try something new. There is an entire world of great products that work with resin that aren't expensive. and I will be exploring a bunch of those this year. So please be sure to like and subscribe if you're interested in what I'm doing. And I would love it if you would leave something in the comments about what you liked about this, or if it's something that you're interested in seeing in the future. I would be so thrilled to hear from you. Thank you.